Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Today is Evergreen's Jordan Sakin and Bob Stolak are with us to be your guide into the world of life settlements. With 10 billion in transactions and 130 years of combined experience, Evergreen offers transparent, personalized service. Their high-touch brokerage process ensures optimal results for advisors and their clients, providing access to unique solutions. Join us now to unlock hidden value in life insurance policy settlements, putting billions back into the hands of policy owners for pressing financial priorities. And with that, Bob and Jordan, if you want to take it from here.
Surely. Thank you, Emmy. Appreciate it.
Of course.
My name is Bob Stolak. I'm the president of the Senior Circuit Group, and my partner here is Jordan Sakin, who's the vice president of Evergreen Settlements.
Morning.
So we both look pretty good for being in business 130 years, I'd say. Yeah. We want to thank NFI for presenting us today with this webinar. They've been great partners, and we look forward to doing more business with them, ongoing. So thank you. Everyone is on this webinar today has an interest, and we're told a great interest in finding out about life settlements. You might have a client that may be a potential case. You might think, well, we see these commercials on TV all the time. How do I get started with this? What's the process? So we're going to go through this today, and what you're going to be happy you showed up, because we're going to make this very, very easy for you to get involved with this if that's what you choose to do. And so we're going to answer all kinds of questions about who's a good candidate, does this work? Go through that whole process. So in getting started, I'd like to ask Jordan, if you would explain what a life settlement is, and just get a little bit into the background of that, just so we get a little base for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bob, and thank you to NFI. Thank you to everybody else for attending tonight. Really appreciate it, and do hope the time is well spent with us in learning a little bit more about what the life settlement marketplace can offer to you, but more importantly, what it can offer to the clients that rely on your trusted advice. A little bit of background, just very simple. What is a life settlement? A life settlement is the sale of an unwanted, unneeded, or unaffordable life insurance policy. And I'm going to put a slide up right now that I think really speaks to why this marketplace exists. 88% of policies, this is permanent policies, do not result in a death claim. For term policies, that number is well in excess of 90%. So you're talking over 8 to 9 out of every 10 life insurance policies that are sold throughout the United States are either lapsed, surrendered, or 1035. Insurance company loves when this is the case. That liability of the death claim no longer exists on their books. Before this industry was founded, in the last 20, 25 years, clients who wanted to part with their policies really only had a single option. If they didn't want to surrender it back to the carrier, or if they wanted to part with that policy, they were going to surrender it back to the carrier at a value that was predetermined by a buyer who was predetermined, and at a value that was predetermined. There's no fair market value. There's no transaction like you would real estate, where you're out there creating a marketplace of buyers and sellers, and a market value is established when those buyers and sellers come together and competitively bid up the asset. That's where market value is determined. And that's what Evergreen does. So a little bit of background on Evergreen, how we came to be in the role that we are as a life settlement broker. Both my colleagues, as well as myself, spent well over a decade, 10, 15, 20 years, working for the largest buyer in the marketplace. During that time, effectively saw how the sausage is made and how the buy side operates, why the buy side is so profitable. But at the same time, it also taught us something very important, that ultimately when you access a single buyer in the marketplace, fair market value is not recognized. It's no different than surrendering that policy back to the carrier. They're going to tell you what the value is. Sure, there's value there, but is it the best value that you can get? And the answer is no. By accessing a single buyer in the marketplace, I can tell you that 100% of the time, money is being left on the table. The buyers in this marketplace are well-capitalized institutions. Take, for example, Blackstone, Apollo, American General. American General owns one of the largest books of business of portfolios of the asset class probably exceeds $20 to $24 billion of death benefit. These are well capitalized, as I mentioned, but they are also stocked with highly trained analysts, sales teams, underwriters. And what their mission is to purchase this policy at the lowest possible price. Many of these buyers are going to purchase the policy today, flip it tomorrow for 3, 4, 5, 10 times its value due to a lack of transparency between the client and the buyer. Evergreen's role is to add transparency, is to be an advocate for you, for your clients, as we on the brokerage side do not represent the buyer. We're a fiduciary to the policy owner. It is our job to go out to the market, and depending on the state, 20, 30, up to about 55 different buyers can compete on the asset through our proprietary auction platform. That's a little bit of background as to what Evergreen is, as to what Evergreen is doing on behalf of you, on behalf of your clients. But for a little bit more depth, I wanted to turn the conversation back over to Bob to give a little case example as to how he came to be in the business and one of the first cases that the two of us worked on together.
Sure, Jordan. Thank you. So this case here is I'm an agent just like everybody on the line here. And a number of years back, I had written 2 life policies for a client of mine. He was a 72-year-old attorney, and it was one for $1 million and one for $500,000. There were 2 GUL, Guaranteed Universal Life policies. He took them out at 72, and he was actually a preferred rating when he took it out, which is kind of unusual for a 72-year-old, but he was. And 7 years forward, when he was 79, he was retiring. And he called me and we spoke, and he told me that the $46,000 a year premium that he was paying on both policies was a bit of a stretch for him. What could we do? So we looked into options for this, one of them being about perhaps reducing the death benefit. I had an associate of mine who was in the life settlement business, and it was a successful life settlement entity in this business. I brought him the case, and he told me that he would not be able to get an offer on this policy. So we got in touch with another company at the time, another brokerage company at the time, and they came through with an offer, okay, from one of the big buyers out there, which we've all seen, advertised, of $50,000. So although for $1.5 million policy, $50,000 offer wasn't great, but if my client surrendered these policies, he would have gotten zero because there was zero cash surrender value in the policies. At that same time, Jordan and I met each other, and him and his firm took over this case. With a matter of weeks, he had, 11, 12 different bid offers on this policy, I believe.
We had north of 14 bids on this policy.
14. And it was interesting in that case that you see every time that a bid comes in, I was being informed about it. They were right on information. There was no chasing that I had to do. There was no chasing my client had to do because everybody was in the loop here. And, it started out about 111, and it went to 135, 175. The bottom line was Evergreen was able to obtain a gross offer of $488,000 for my client. And he was quite happy with that. And that piqued my interest, not only in the amount that they received, but the process and the way they worked and the way Jordan worked. It was very hand holding and, making it very simple, very understandable. Even toward the end, when my buyer was ready to take one of the last few settlement amounts, he told him, just hang in there for another day or two. And I believe you got him another $30,000 for it.
I believe that was the case.
Right. So there was, it was just a very nice entree, into this. So when I saw that happening, it piqued my interest. And then, many deals later and time lapsed here, I became a GA with the company. and it's very, it's just a smooth, great process of, of how that all works. And my client, we wound up actually doing a life settlement on his wife's policy, about a year later, and now he's actually working with me to to bring other business with to our company. So it's just a smooth, nice process. It's very transparent, okay? Very transparent. And when you have, as Jordan had mentioned, when you have a buyer that just either deals direct or gives one bid on the policy, it's either take it or leave it. So like if you're selling your house, I always bring this up as an example. If you're selling your house, you have one buyer who knocks on the door and makes an offer. It's that or nothing. When you have a proprietary bidding process, as we have here, then these buyers bid against one another, just like an auction, and it drives that price up. And it's interesting. It's a win-win-win for everybody. It's a win for our clients. It's a win for the buyers because they want these policies, and they have to buy a lot of them because on some they're going to lose. Because even though we get life expectancies and it's all a mathematical equation, but we know too, just like when people take out life insurance, they're taking it out hoping that they don't ever have to need it because that means they died. Here, it works in reverse. So people live, perhaps a lot longer than the life expectancy would say, states. So the buyers of these policies understand they're going to win on some and lose on some, so they have to buy many of them. So, and we're going to get into how you start this conversation, with your clients, on how to actually do this. Where if you have a client or a prospect or a family member or a friend, the situation here is you want someone general. These are general rules of someone who's, the older the better. So a minimum age of 65, 70, 75, 80, that's, even better. And they have an impairment to their health situation since they took out the policy. So this example that I just gave you of the attorney, he came in as preferred. He's very active and going about his daily life now, but he's not in the same health condition that he was, prior to taking out that policy. So you want to change. What gets the best price is if you have a change in the rating of the client, an impairment in their health. Once they, since they had taken out that policy. But to get the conversation started, you could be with a client. You might be talking about annuities. You might be talking about, Medicare, whatever your subject line is, and then you just ask them if they have a policy, and you want to know if they do have a policy, perhaps what type it is, and they give you that information. Of course, you have a discussion with them, and you see. And the big question of this would be: is the reason that you took out this policy, has that changed? Okay? Maybe they took out the policy to protect their children and family, and the children are all grown up and they don't need the parents' protection anymore. Maybe they took it out for a spouse that's no longer here. Maybe they have a policy they had a business with a partner or partners, and they took it out on a buy-sell agreement type of policy where they don't have that business anymore, but they kept the policy because maybe it's $1 million policy, $2 million, whatever, it might be. And they just decided to continue to pay the premium because it perhaps is affordable. And they don't realize that it has a value to it. My client, and quite frankly, myself at the time, I didn't have an idea that it was going to come out to be $488,000. Okay? So people have better reasons for the monies when the reason goes away while they took out the policy for. Okay? And another big thing here is the premium. Has the premium changed since you took out the policy? Will it Will it change? You know, a lot of people who took out permanent plans think that their policy is not, you know, that's going to be the rate for the rest of their life. So when they turn perhaps 79, 80, 81, 82, whatever that policy was guaranteed to, but they don't realize it, then they get a premium notice that it went up 5, 10 fold of what they were paying before. They say, this must be a typo. I have to call the insurance company. And they realize now this is their premium. A lot of those policies are given up. Approximately $120 billion a year of face amount are turned back to the insurance companies. And very few people are getting their policies appraised. And that's what we offer here. We offer here free appraisals for the client. There's never one nickel that they ever have to come out of pocket for, and at least find out what it's worth, you know. And we could tell them quickly, give them a good idea quickly, and if they care to move forward in the process, you know, we embellish that and get them, you know, exact numbers once we go through the bidding process. Yeah. So
the appraisal process that Bob's talking about, that's really where everything started. The sale of a life insurance policy is a very different sale than that of real estate, than that of their equity portfolio. For your real estate, you can go on Zillow, you can go on the internet, you can find out what a comparable home to yours sold for. Your equity account, you can log into your Fidelity account and find out what Apple's trading at. And you know the value of what it is that you can liquidate the asset for. That doesn't exist for life insurance. And back to the original point that I had made, is that buyers know this and they rely on a lack of transparency. And that's why your clients need an advocate in this market. That advocate is Evergreen, as we do have the experience in doing so over an extended period of time. But understanding the triggering events, as Bob's talking about, that trigger why would somebody want their policy appraised? That's what's going to be the key. Helping to educate your clients on a market that maybe they've heard of, maybe they know somebody who sold the policy, a colleague, a neighbor, a family member. But for them to say, my policy sold for X, your policy could probably sell for Y, that unfortunately is not an accurate representation of how the market and how buyers are going to assess the value of this policy. So for clients, again, if they're hearing about it on the television, those television advertisements are going to be very different than any other financial instrument that they're going to hear about. When you're talking about annuities on television, when you're talking about life insurance, those ads always end with call your advisor. Ask your advisor if Prudential's appropriate for you. Same thing with medicine. Ask your doctor if Lipitor is the right drug to manage your cholesterol. The buyers who are advertising directly to your clients, they're creating consumer awareness, they're creating demand. But the difference is at the end of that call, at the end of that advertisement, it's call us. Well, why would the client not call? They think that that's a very interesting piece of information. Let's call, let's find out what our policy is worth. And over so many cases, and I'll give you a quick example right now, there's a huge difference between what an offer is and what the right offer is. Wrapped up a case recently, very quickly, 77-year-old gentleman, small $300,000 policy. Premiums were becoming unaffordable. His wife had predeceased him, didn't need the coverage anymore. Called up the television, said, help me figure out what my policy is worth. Had about $1,000, $1,200 of surrender value in that policy. A couple weeks later, gets back to them, says, we can purchase this policy for $14,000. $300,000 policy that was effectively going to be worth $1,000 if he surrendered it. Said $14,000, amazing. Sign me up, I'll sell the policy. The gentleman gets the purchase documents, flashes them by his attorney for a review. Attorney, fortunately, on behalf of the client, was a gentleman that I had a good relationship, did a number of pieces of business with. And he was a huge advocate for clients seeking fair market value in the asset. He said, do me a favor. Let me show your policy, your information to Evergreen. Let's just make sure $14,000 is a good offer, is the best offer. Within 10 business days, we turned around with $135,000. That right there, I tell the story because it is not an atypical story. Multiple fold, the numbers went up, benefiting the client. This happens every day. Again, buyers are trying to buy the policy for as little as possible. The client needs representation. And if there's one point that we take away from today's webinar, is that in this marketplace, representation matters. it matters for peace of mind, and it matters for the financial goal that you are reaping from the sale of this asset. If you're going to part with a policy that you've paid for 10 years, for 20 years, 40 years, why not receive the best value for that policy? Clients are using this to supplement their retirement. They're using this to add liquidity injections back into a business, cover the cost of long-term care. There's no restrictions as to what you could use the liquidity for. Advisors out there are taking this and putting it back into annuities to help their clients better plan for retirement. And that's where the story with NFI really breeds a nice connection, that we're all able to work together to achieve your client's best goal.
Yes, for sure. You know, you bring up the fiduciary part, Jordan, and that's very important, because we're, from start to finish, we represent the client, and not only is it our legal legal obligation to do that, but if we get more money for the client, we're able to seek out more monies for the client, then the agents, us, we get paid higher, because, you know, that's saying the more they make, the more we make. So, and that's true, you know, in this case for sure. It's you know, it's a very beneficial thing. Like I said, it's a win-win-win, you know, all the way. So here's another example of what, if you have a client that is interested in a life settlement, and we wind up doing a case for them. So now let's say they get, you know, a few $100,000 from the case, which is, you know, very typical. So now where are they parking that money? Okay? They have to put it somewhere. Okay? Now they might have an immediate need for it, and long-term care, let's say, we know that a lot of people still don't have long-term care policies, and they might be in needing of care, and they might need those monies to pay those bills that are going on. That could be a reason, you know, for it. They could use the money, as you mentioned, any way they want. Okay? But if they need to park it somewhere, well, guess what? You're the agent. You have you know, an annuity business. And I'm sure you'll be able to find a proper place for that, where they can get a nice return on those funds, you know, rather than sitting in a life policy that they're never going to, you know, that they have no use for anymore. Again, if a client bought the policy and the reason they bought it still exists, the premiums are affordable, and it's not going to implode on them, then they're really not a candidate for us here. Nor do we want them to sell that asset that's sitting there, okay? Because that's not what this is about. What this is about is the hidden asset. They didn't know its value. They don't have the reason for that they took the policy out anymore. That reason does not exist anymore. And it's sort of, well, what do I do with this now? I'm paying for this. I'm never going to see the benefit because it's a death benefit. What do I do with this? Well, we could show them, and you know, of what its value is of that asset right now for free. Okay, no charge to them. Okay, if they're interested in doing that. Now, when I say no charge to them, there's a charge to us. So we have to have people who are serious about this, of course, you know, as well as we're very serious about it. But it's not. I want to express this very clearly. It's not a lot of work on the agent's end here. So you could do as much or as little as you want. As little meaning that you could give a name and a phone number, and we could take it from there. Or you could be involved in this every step of the way, which we'd like you to be, because that will drive more cases. Once you see how this works and how satisfied everybody is, it's gonna drive more cases. We have, you know, marketing materials if you want. You know, we have extensive programs that can help you get into your you know, prospect and client list, that you can let them know that you're doing this now. It all depends what it is that you know, how extensive you want to get into this. Let me give you my phone number. If you have a pen handy, I'm gonna give you some information here. Again, my name is Bob Stolack, Stolack. I'm the president of the Senior Circuit Group. Okay. My phone number is 561-251-8255. 561-251-8680. Again, 561-251-8680. And my website address is sell, SELL, my policy, POLICY 4, that's the number 4, more, MORE.com. So it's sell my policy, the number 4, more.com. And, would like to speak with anyone who's interested in, getting more information. If you have possibly a client or a prospect for this, or, I'd be happy to speak with you and your client, whatever you're comfortable with. And, we could help you through this process. I'm going to let Jordan talk about the compensation, if you don't mind, to, give a couple of examples of that, of what, because
absolutely.
Not that they're interested in the compensation, but you might as well talk to them about
it. Before I jump into the compensation piece, really want to tie it back to the education. The advisors that I work with who are doing the most business, who are seeing the most success from this business, and whose clients are quite thrilled with the results, they're the advisors who are talking about this with their clients regularly. Clients are calling advertisements on TV, calling advertisements in the print ad, because they don't know that you, their trusted fiduciary, can represent them in this transaction. So when you see a client who's requesting reduced death benefit illustrations, policy enters grace, a term policy that's approaching its deadline for convertibility, it's our obligation as fiduciaries to reach out to that client to help them understand that this is a viable option for them, and that they don't have to walk away from this policy after paying on this policy for years and years for nothing, for a nominal value that the carrier tells them it's worth. We can help you help your clients. And that's ultimately the goal of this. The conversation regarding compensation is that total compensation on a given case, it's going to represent 1/3 of the value that's created. Of that, the advisor yourselves will be receiving 40% of that. Give you a case example, just with some even round numbers to help really drive that and identify what that looks like. Case is going to be $1 million face amount policy, and the cash surrender of this policy is nothing. It's guaranteed policy. Client could walk away with nothing for this policy, or we could take it to the market. Well, they took it to the market, and the gross offers started at $20,000, went to $30,000, $40,000, and eventually settled at $90,000. So $90,000 of value was created for this $1 million policy. 1/3 of that compensation, or 1/3 of that gross offer, equals $30,000, which generated the total compensation pool. Of that, the advisor receives 40%, representing $12,000. The advisor walks away thrilled. The advisor from these cases are getting referral after referral because their client is generating liquidity from an asset that they were not otherwise going to keep on the books, or a policy that was just simply underperforming their needs. There's opportunity out there for advisors to generate substantial new revenue. I've got offices out there that are making 6, 7, multiple 7 figures a year, just simply talking to their clients and helping their clients understand that a life settlement can be a financial lifeline if they need that additional liquidity in retirement, or it can just be an injection of capital that they didn't know they needed, but they knew they didn't need the policy. Most policy owners that come to the market, these are not cash-strapped individuals. Policies on average, they're floating in the $1.5 to $2 million range. These are high net worth individuals. These are affluent individuals. These are not individuals who are necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, but they outgrew the need for that policy, as Bob talked about. And that's the key, is recognizing what those triggering events look like. One of the big questions that I get from clients, from advisors, is there actual regulation in this business? And I wanted to pivot into that quickly because that's a very important part of the story. This world is regulated. 44 out of this country's 50 states, approximately representing about 90% of the US population, has robust life settlement regulation. Life settlement regulation is done at the state level, and that the same insurance departments that regulate your life and annuity license. So this is a consumer-friendly, consumer-protected event for these policy owners. They're not dealing with an individual investor. We're working with well-capitalized institutions of the world. As Bob said, these are buyers who are acquiring hundreds of millions, billions of death benefit each year over a well-diversified portfolio. Clients can benefit, advisors can benefit, and it all starts with the conversation. Do you need this policy? Is this policy performing up to your expectations? Has your beneficiary changed? These are some of the questions that when you're doing an annual review with your clients, assessing their needs today, what their needs will be down the road, use this in your quiver. Use this as a tool. Call Bob, reach out to us, reach out to NFI. The partnership that we have with NFI is one that I greatly value and one that you guys should as well. So I look forward to working on future business with you guys. Look forward to addressing any questions that you have about this market, how clients benefit, how advisors benefit. And most importantly, does my case work? That's the number one question we get. We've got a very simple, straightforward process to help you assess if a case is going to work that I wanted to run you by. Typically speaking, we can help you within 24 to 48 hours assess the viability of a case. All I'm going to need is an illustration, typically one showing minimum level premiums to maturity, as well as the client's date of birth. From there, what we do is we will turn the illustration over to our analysts. And our analysts, again, within 2 business days, will create what we call our MVP, our market value projection. This right here is an analytical breakdown, exactly how a buyer will look at this policy. We will break down the cost of insurance, the premium outflow, and determine what this policy is worth at various life expectancy points. We're going to help you assess the viability. If you come to us with a 73-year-old client and our analysts break down the policy and say this policy is going to require a life expectancy no greater than 10 years in order to qualify, well, that means that this policy is pretty expensive. That means that this policy was likely issued at a high rating. And if you're telling me that 73-year-old had conditions when the policy was issued that assess that rating to it, but doesn't have those conditions today, I'm going to save you a lot of time up front. Our job is to help you work on the cases that are going to enter the most viable scenarios, help you help your clients. So if we can look at this together and say, hey, this does make sense. This client likely has a life expectancy that's going to fit within this box of viability. Well, that's then a natural conversation for you to have with your client to set expectations. Brings us back to that real estate conversation. You're not going to go out to the market, employ a real estate agent, them get the value of your home, find a buyer, only for you to say, well, that wasn't the value I was expecting. You've got a fair idea of what your home's worth when you enter into a contract, when you enter into a selling arrangement with a real estate agent. We're giving you the tools to set those expectations up front. This is something that, again, I'm happy to have our analysts produce for you within a very quick amount of time.
Right. And I could back up and just verify that absolutely things are done very efficiently and quickly and correctly, which is a little different than perhaps we're used to in the insurance world. So I see, by the way, if you have any questions, please, type them out. We do have a couple of questions here.
It looks like we've got a couple rolling in right now from John.
Yeah, happy to start taking those questions.
Yeah, what are the tax consequences of the settlement to the client is our first one here.
Yeah, John, that's a great question, one that I get rather often. The IRS is very clear on what the tax consequences is. And it's going to be a 3-tiered system that up to the cost basis into your policy is a tax-free event. From your cost basis to your surrender value is going to be taxed at ordinary income levels. Anything above the surrender value up to that purchase price is going to be taxed at long-term capital gains.
Wonderful. And then another question, are the last to die contracts good prospects for a settlement?
The answer is yes and no. Second to die policies, because you are underwriting the lives of 2 insureds, it's a little trickier. There's definitely additional risk to that. Now, I'm working on a fair amount of second to die policies right now where they are working. Most of the time when if a second to die policy comes to market and both policy owner or both insureds, are healthy, it's going to be a tough policy. However, if there are impairments with those, there's a lot of buyers out there who will seek, they have specific target allocations for survivorship policies. So yes, if there is a health impairment, if there is a change in health, if there is a scenario where the first insured, the male, the female is deceased and there's a single life left, those are definitely viable options that should be considered. I think the ultimate answer to that question is the same answer I would give to any policy, is that if there is a case out there where a client is considering a lapse, a surrender, some alternative to maintaining the life of that policy, reach out to Bob, reach out to NFI. Let's have that conversation. Let's put together the MVP. Let's look at, does this case work? If it does work, how well does it work? So we all understand the variables that go into it and what the potential output looks like.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question here. Who owns the policy that Evergreen buys?
So Evergreen is a broker. Evergreen is not going to be the purchaser of that policy. Evergreen represents your clients, the policy owners in the transaction. Our fiduciary responsibility is to the policy owner. We will work with buyers throughout the country, up to 50 plus buyers, again, depending on the state in where that policy is domiciled. So the institutional buyer will be the owner of that policy. Again, these are large, reputable companies that are many are household names. Berkshire Hathaway, American General, Blackstone represent some of the largest portfolio aggregators of the business.
Awesome. A couple other questions here. How long does this process typically take?
So process will typically take up to, I would quote, 3 to 4 months on the high end. And the largest variable is going to be the aggregation of medical records. As I'm sure you know, on the annuity side, on the life side, there's a lot of doctors' offices out there who place really little attention to producing medical records for clients for insurance purposes. Again, biggest X factor. If we can get in medical records in a timely amount of time, from there, the process will move pretty straightforward, pretty quickly in a streamlined manner. That, again, is going to be a high touch point manner that we will keep you looped in, informed about every update regarding the entire time. So 3 months is a very typical time. That said, if you have a case that's got a tight deadline, if there's a conversion coming up in 3 weeks, there are funds that we can work with that will not look at medical records, that will take this case from start to finish in a much quicker time. So I do like to throw it out there that deadlines are something that we can always work with.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question here. Who are the average policy owners? Where do you find them?
Okay, I'll take that one if you don't mind.
Of course.
Right, because where do you find them? Well, you find them in your own client base. You find them. The parameters here, what we spoke about before, was you want someone who's generally a senior citizen, because that's, they might have the policy a few years, they might have the policy a lot of years. It could be, that could vary. But generally you want someone who's north of 65 with a minimum death benefit generally of $100,000. Okay? So it could be in your client base. It could be where it could be within your family group, your friends. It's a topic. You know what I found interesting about this is that, which surprised me a little bit, is that when I bring up this topic to people, you know how we're being agents, when they see us knocking on the door, they say, "Oh, the insurance guy is here. What, we got to write a check. We got to, they sort of get a little squeamish, and we're not the most popular people generally for our clients to be looking forward to. Whenever they have to write a check, it's always a little painful, even though you might be making them money. What intrigued me about this is that you're giving them money. They never have to write a check here. You're working with them to get them the most amount of money for an asset that they didn't realize. So this subject, you're not bothering people by bringing up, asking questions about their life insurance policy. Is the beneficiary of the policy the reason you bought it still the same? Has that changed? You're helping them fix a problem that they might have. So it works very well. So these people are everywhere, but generally, if you have a healthy 45-year-old who, that's not going to work, for this here. It's generally someone who's a senior, whose health has been impaired since the inception of the policy. And by the way, a big question that usually comes up: does term work on this as well? Because a lot of people think that term can't work because term runs out. Well, as we know, term has a convertibility period, generally to age 70, sometimes longer, depending upon the company. And term could work very well because there's sort of an urgency. We're working on some term cases right now where if let's say you took out a 20-year policy and you were 55 years old and now you're 73, 74, you have a year or two to go on it. And if you let it lapse, we know there's definitely zero cash surrender value in that. And maybe your health has changed where you be rated if you took a new policy out, or maybe you're uninsurable at this point and you can't afford that. And maybe you can't afford the convertibility premium that it's going to be. But there's probably a buyer for it. So term could work very well. So the answer is every policy works, but some work better than others. It depends upon, each individual case. But as an agent, that's not the focus of, in my opinion, of where you should be. If you have someone that's interested in this, you have a client or a prospect that's interested in this, just give us a call and we'll ask the proper questions. We'll be able to take it through the process to see if this is something that could be a case or not very quickly. And, then you can learn it as we go along here. So I don't know if you want to add something to that, Jordan, but that's.
No, I think you hit on that right there. On the term side, an added bonus is that whenever that policy is going to get converted, you as the agent will be retained as the agent of record on that case. That is a nice incentive to help you and to help your client. There's multiple cases I'm working on the term side right now, but I just closed one that's going to go down, and I'll be telling this story for a while. 71-year-old individual, definitely had some change in health since the policy was issued, but by no means was the gentleman uninsurable, a decline across the board, fully insurable, just a mild rating to him. But the guy had about $10 million. He had $10 million of insurance. And guy was considering, didn't need the insurance, could easily afford it, but didn't need it. Well, we took this policy to market. We aggregated his medical records. Our underwriters looked at the case internally and definitely found there was going to be a sweet spot with a handful of buyers out there. We took this policy out, 38 unique bids on this policy, ultimately delivering on the $10 million policy that the gentleman was likely going to walk away with nothing for, $1.3 million. $1.3 million was the purchase price. The advisor on this case for a $10 million conversion received a little over $400,000 paid directly from the carrier. This advisor, he's done some big sales in his day, obviously, as a guy selling $10 million of insurance. But to resell that policy in the open market for over $400,000 of commission paid directly from the carrier, that's a guy who's likely going to be looking for additional business. And I can tell you he's got 7 other cases in my pipeline right now. This gentleman, these are the kind of cases that motivate the advisors, that help the clients. The term is the low-hanging fruit of the marketplace. If there is a convertible term policy where the client is likely not going to convert it, can't afford to convert it, reach out to them. Oftentimes when I'm talking with newer agents, I would just recommend that they, on every couple months, just pull a report. How many term policies in your book of business are coming due in the next quarter, next 2 quarters, and proactively reach out to those clients. Term clients are historically not the most high-touch clients. It's a good opportunity to get back in front of them. Do they need that policy? Do they want that policy? Can they afford the conversion? And if the answer is no, and they meet the criteria, that's absolutely something that we can assist you with.
Awesome. All right, we've got time for about 1 or 2 more questions here. Looks like, will buyers be available in rural states such as Montana, Oklahoma, things like that?
The answer is yes. And I smile when I see Montana because one of the largest cases I ever worked on was back in 2022 on a wealthy landowner in Montana. Total death benefit totaled about it was $76 or $77 million of death benefit. Gentleman just needed a liquidity infusion into his family, into his well-diversified business practice. We had well over, I want to go to 40 plus bids on this policy, representing 11 different buyers. The buyers are not necessarily domiciled in the state in which they do business, but they are licensed in the state. They are licensed with the state insurance department as active legal entities who are able to purchase the policy. So the answer is yes. If there's a state in which you do business in and your clients reside, or they have a trust domiciled in, we will be able to match them with a buyer. Oftentimes, if they are international even, there are scenarios where we can help them.
Awesome.
So I wouldn't necessarily restrict what state you're in. Every state has a unique set of regulation employed by that state insurance department. Many of them represent each other's in a reciprocity manner, but we can help you through that at the time.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Final question here. I see television ads for life settlements. How are you different from those companies?
I think I hit on this earlier. Life settlement advertisements on TV, they are saying, come to us, we'll buy your policy. That's great. They're educating the consumer, and I consider that a very positive thing. On the negative, client's not going to receive fair value for that asset. The reason we started Evergreen really boils down to how do we help the policy owner win in this transaction? How do we help the policy owner get in a better spot than they were at? That $50,000 offer that Bob represented on the case that he discussed up front, client might have said yes, client might have said no to that offer. But ultimately, that was not the best offer. The buyer on television, the buyer represents themselves. They represent their investors. Evergreen represents you. And I've said that a lot today, but that's why we are in business. We represent you and your clients. We will take the time up front to develop an optimal path to success for that case. I'll often describe to agents that we function very similar to how a substandard general agency will do so. That we'll look at the client's medical records, we'll look at the policy. Our underwriters will assess that policy for the most optimal path forward. There's probably about 8 or 9 different life expectancy underwriters in this market that buyers will say, yes, we will buy a policy based on their rendering. Well, the role that our internal underwriters play is the same as the internal underwriters play at a substandard GA, because they're not going to send every case over to Prudential. They're not going to send every case over to John Hancock. The underwriting criteria differs and sometimes differs vastly. If I know that somebody has a cardiac issue as their primary impairment, or somebody has a cognitive issue as their primary impairment, there's 1 or 2 underwriters that I'm going to send that to in the marketplace, because I know that their underwriting will render a life expectancy more aggressive, sometimes by multiple years than other life expectancy companies. What we're going to do is we're going to hunt down that most aggressive life expectancy and put that in front of the buyers. If there's a life expectancy out there that I view as an outlier, one that is not going to represent and put your client in a favorable spot, a life expectancy report's going in our archives. It's not going to the buyer. We're doing everything that we can to represent you and your clients to make sure that they're walking away with this with the highest possible value. We're utilizing the leverage from years of experience, contacts, and our network of experience to benefit your clients. That's how we're going to be different than the direct buyers and help enhance the value that your client receives.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of this webinar, I believe. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today's webinar. If you have questions that we didn't answer, please feel free to give NFI Solutions a call at 952-887-1239. And we are also so happy to connect you to the folks over at Evergreen and get these questions answered. Thank you so much for your time today, Jordan and Bob. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate you guys and everything that we're going to work on together.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye now. Thanks.